testing out the streaming thing again too. See
Okay.
if it works. Just for kicks. I'm not gonna publish it, but you know. I need to get a better camera though. My laptop camera is 720p. It's kind of lame.
I got
Yours is
1080,
yours is 1080, but it goes
but it's
blurry.
bad. Yeah, but it's blurry in 1080. It's not pixelated.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, ready to go?
Yeah, I forgot. I forgot about something.
What?
I'll tell you in a sec.
Well, welcome to Following the Fire. Happy to have everybody here on the podcast. We are back from our 2 week hiatus for Thanksgiving. Happy to be back. Good to see you again, Nathan.
Hey, hello everyone. Good to see you, Steve. It's nice to have a break every once in a while.
It is. We kind of didn't plan it; it just kind of worked out.
Yeah, and
I'm okay with it.
like the most breaks that I take, I didn't like read a bunch of books or catch up on anything.
Yeah, the first thing I did was write a to-do list for my vacation time, and I promptly did like one of the 12 things because I accidentally did.
Yep. Yeah, on accident. That's funny.
Yeah,
I have a impact matrix. I believe we've spoken
yeah,
about that,
yeah, yeah.
but I have a
Did
bunch
a
of
few.
sticky notes on a window in my house, arranged by impact to my life and how easy they are. So I always do the top left one, which is high impact, low effort. I think right now what it says is buy a pair of pants because I have maybe 10 pairs of pants. Um, Maybe 7 of them are the exact same pair of pants.
Really?
Like, I just look at the label on the back and order another one when I need it. But all 100% of my pairs of pants right now have a hole in the right knee.
The right knee.
None
Okay.
of them have a hole in the left knee. They all have a hole in the right knee.
You cross your left leg over your right, don't you?
Oh, what? I just thought I had a more pointy, like a bone spur or something. Yeah, that's got to be it. I
Yeah,
don't
and we
know.
do have an international audience, so we might want to refer to them as trousers.
My trousers uh, are pre-worn than the left.
Yeah,
Anyways, it
I
doesn't
recently.
matter in a remote world because nobody sees
No,
my
it doesn't.
knees.
Yeah, I recently bought last year. I bought a pair of internet pants. Just meaning from the internet instead of actually
Okay,
going to a store to try them on. Worked great. Been
the
wearing them all
way I
year.
interpreted internet pants is like stretchy sweatpants.
Well, they're actually stretchy jeans.
Ah, nice.
They're COVID internet trousers, I
Yeah,
should
they
say.
are. COVID adjustable.
COVID adjustable.
I made the switch to stretchy fabric a few years ago, and life is
Yeah.
much better. I highly recommend it.
Oh yeah, it's much better. Less guilt, shame.
So I've got a. I was laughing earlier. So occasionally I will stumble onto like Christian Reddit. I would not
Mm.
recommend it, but there's some interesting things that come up. I'll save some for maybe future discussions. But one of them, just because I got a crack out of this, it was a Church of Christ thing. And it was like, how do you meet decent Christians in this day and age? And all of the suggestions were like really sketchy sounding websites, and I couldn't tell
No.
if it was people trolling because so it was like, Church of Christ meets Church of Christ, or like Hot Church of Christ, singles or whatever. And
Hot church.
it was just like that cannot be real. And so
Sanctified Church of Christ singles is what you're looking
yeah,
for.
mutual edification dot 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 com. Um, but I was scared to like. I was like, man, I just want to see so bad what this looks like. But I was scared to type it in because I was sure this is just like direct line to a virus. Um, but one of them apparently is real. It looks real sketchy. It's probably real and also stealing information. It seems to have like 7 people total. Um, and it like one of my favorites, what usernames was Proverbs 31 man. So that's the and
This is a dating site?
it's yeah, it's specifically a Church of Christ dating site.
Is it churchofchristSingles.com?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, that was developed by a good friend of mine when I was in college.
No way, it's real?
It's
Really?
real. Yeah.
Okay.
He was frustrated because he couldn't find any other Church of Christ girls, and so he built it so he could find some, and then he found his wife.
Well,
They got
there you
married.
go. Now I feel
Had like
bad.
6 kids.
Do they listen?
I don't doubt it. Yeah,
Just
it
that
it
cracked me
looks
up.
like a year 2007 website though. It
It
hasn't been
does.
touched in a long time.
Yeah. That makes me feel better because I was like, this has got to be like Russia just stealing people's information.
It says they have
Um,
234,000 members.
what?
Maybe just not active, but
Yeah, I just went on to Who's Online right now, which of course is
oh, okay, yeah, I see that.
um,
Success stories. Look at that.
oh, what? Maybe I should have given this a better.
This guy's username is Fishing for God. I mean, hey, if you're looking for love and you have a very narrow,
Yeah,
you know, band of acceptance, go for it.
that's what technology is good at doing.
Yeah, my buddy Jim, who made this, is super good guy. I assume it looks like it's still active, so he must still be doing it. I don't know.
There you go. That's funny.
Yeah.
What are the chances that probably really high that the degree of separation from what I assume is like a fake dating site is just like one of your friends' projects? Now I feel bad for making fun of it.
You shouldn't. It's fine. We'll forgive you.
Also, you can choose relationship. I'm going to keep making fun of it a little bit more. You can choose relationship type. And from the ones I can see, the choices are serious, marriage, or friends,
Huh.
which I
Like
feel like is,
that you're searching for?
yeah, that's like what you're looking for. I don't know why you would choose serious and not marriage,
Hmm.
but I feel like those are not mutually, you could have a serious friendship and marriage with all the same person. Anyway, so there's that. If you need to find Proverbs 31, man's just looking for friends, though. So
Oh,
yeah,
he's a nice guy.
yeah.
He lives in Florida, though. I don't know about that.
Florida Proverbs 31, man.
Nothing personal, Carlin, if you're listening. But, Florida.
Florida has a strong Church of Christ presence, but
It does.
they have their own school that's like almost a separate, like it's separate from like the Abilene Christian, Oklahoma Christian.
It's a Florida college, right? That's what it's called?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like super fundamentalist, super conservative, I think. Had some
It's like,
friends who've gone there.
I feel like the there's just not a whole lot of interaction. There's like Northern Christian Church of Christians, Southern Church of Christians, but then Florida is like an island that developed kind of independently. It seems like, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, it makes sense.
yeah,
Try to
I like
try to
Florida.
avoid Florida when we can. So tonight I've got a kind of a crossover between psychology, which is kind of one of my hobbies, and faith, which is kind of one of my hobbies.
Yeah, does it sound? Are you allowed to call it that?
You know what? I just
One of my
realized
callings.
callings. Maybe that's
Yeah,
it.
I feel like beekeeping and brewing are callings of mine, and faith.
Calling. They're not. So they're not hobbies.
They're not hobbies. No. Yeah, it's what I was meant to do.
Well, if you're making honey or maybe mead, right?
Yep.
honey.
Combines all of them. I make it
Put some
in
honey
the
and water and
Trappist.
just let it sit there.
Yep. Yeah. Possibly the
Nice.
original alcohol, because it's one of the
Yeah.
few that you can make on accident and it still tastes good.
There's a really good, really interesting um, documentary. I think I saw it on Amazon Prime called "How Beer Saved the World." It's been around a while, but it's really good. Talking about how because of beer and like the accidental possible formation of grains and sitting in water for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
how that allowed people to live because for so long they had just all the water was nasty once we started living near each other. But you brew beer and water's suddenly not nasty.
I have even heard it argued that beer and bread either existed at this, like, came about at the same time, or that beer could have even been first.
Yeah, I heard that.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Yeah, and the folks who built the pyramids were paid in beer. This is like liquid bread.
Yeah.
They found like the inscriptions and stuff like this dude gets a, barrel of ale for his work this week or whatever.
Wow, that's so interesting. I like reading about historical beers, and there's a book I have about like Belgian like working farm beers,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, if you were a worker, you would get your beer for the day, and it was your lunch. It was your hydration and your
Yep.
lunch, and kind of part of your wages. So
Cool.
how do we get
I don't
your
know.
hobby? Psychology and faith.
So, right. So psychology and faith. So so we know, and I'll get into what it is in a minute, but let me set the stage, if you'll allow me.
Paint us a picture.
So you may not realize this, Nathan, but the world is currently clearly falling apart. It just is.
Yeah.
Just
Also,
trust me
my
on that.
my pants on the right side.
Exactly.
The right side. Sorry.
Sorry, that was really good. Uh, but so the world, yes, the world is falling apart. The country, especially on the right, the United States, especially, is falling apart. And I've seen a lot of videos recently from around the world of people like basically saying, "Hey, America, are you okay? You guys doing all right?" You know,
Yeah.
not just from the politics, but just the coronavirus stuff and um, just everything. Everything's falling apart. And have you heard of Jordan Klepper?
Was he a comedian?
Yeah, he's a comedian. He's like on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
goes. He's known for kind of going around to like Trump rallies and stuff and interviewing people. It's kind of like a Jay Leno when he used to do like the people on the
Man.
street stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And I've watched him, interview people at Trump rallies who are so clearly going against their own interests and who contradict themselves and who appear to be just going along blindly with whatever Trump and his opinions say, and it's frustrating. I mean, I know it happens on both sides, and I know they're editing it special, blah blah blah. But I mean, I've seen my family members eating this kind of garbage, and I have a just sort of distant family member who's very anti-mask, anti-vax, and really into all the QAnon stuff. And I remember the day before the insurrection at the Capitol, she posted on Facebook, "The storm's coming tomorrow." Like, what? And her entire family, kids and all, contracted COVID, and her husband was put in a hospital for several weeks, almost died, and she's still claiming that it's all false. It's like just made up.
Right.
And good, strong Christian people who I used to look up to are still buying it, still claiming that the election was stolen, and these sweet people are suddenly super xenophobic and hateful and violent and all this stuff. I mean, it's too depressing. I could go on, but I mean, the level of insanity in the USA has spiked in the past 5 years. It seems, because has it really? I mean, maybe we just know more about things, and people are louder than they used to be.
Yeah.
Um, but here's a question: do these people think that they're doing the right thing?
Yes,
Yes, of
absolutely.
course they do. Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody, very few people think that they're the bad guy. They think that they have figured it out and they're doing the right stuff. Are these people on the right? Are they the only ones making illogical decisions?
Nope.
No, of course they're not. Have you, Nathan, ever made an illogical decision? The one that
Yes.
goes against your own interests?
I'm known for that. That's one of my personality traits.
Is it one of your hobbies
It's
or
one of
your
my
callings?
callings. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just writers at the Capitol. I mean, we all do this. And it's easy to be just throw stones at the folks who are currently in the spotlight for being blinded by whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but it kind of got me thinking, why are we doing this to ourselves? I mean, God gave us the gift of intellect and reasoning in order to figure this stuff out. I mean, I grew up being taught to exalt and praise the values of logical thought and truth, and always think through things, pay attention to what's going on, and use your reasoning skills. But it just doesn't happen. And the problem is not that we are necessarily deceived or that we are trying to do the wrong thing. I think the problem is that we're humans and our brains are lazy, just to put it bluntly. But it's lazy in a good way. Usually, it usually helps us. So I manage a bunch of software engineers at work,
Mm-hmm.
and one of my team leads often says that the best software engineer is a lazy one
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that.
because they tend to figure out the most efficient way of doing things so they can write the least amount of code, which ends up being better because less code equals less bugs and less problems and on and on. So our brains are kind of like that because they like to come up with shortcuts and ways of figuring out what's going on without having to think through the whole thing. So we develop these. There's just so much information to process in the world to make decisions. You'd kind of go crazy walking through the world, trying to process all of it by piece. And um,
Noticing everything,
yeah,
remembering everything with
yeah,
equal importance.
right. And that's actually one of the theories of what the frustrations of autism can be. And there's like my daughter's autistic. She's got some fascinating and amazing abilities, but processing things is a struggle for her sometimes because people with autism tend to literally process everything equally. They hear everything, they see everything, and they remember everything.
Right.
That's a heavy load on your brain.
Yep.
And so when their kids are young, they often just kind of shut down and they're nonverbal and things like that. Because they don't have this, their brains are just wired differently, so they don't have the ability to filter like this. But neurotypical people tend to have this ability to filter, and sometimes we filter so well we screw things up, which is why it's good to keep some autistic people around you to help you realize when you're filtering too much.
Right.
Um, and it's often referred to as pattern matching because that's what it is. Our brains look for patterns. Everywhere we look, we're looking for a pattern.
Yeah.
And it makes life easier and manageable, and it can keep us alive. Like in the forest, back in the good old days when we were living in the forest, um, if you hear footfalls behind you that don't sound quite right, quite like a human, you turn around and you see four, soft padded feet connected to a mountain lion. It's good that you saw that because you heard something that didn't fit the pattern.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're wrong. Our pattern matching is incorrect. We like back to the forest thing. I may be in the forest and I see a bush moving and I hear some sounds that match the pattern perfectly for a deer. So you might shoot at it, only to find that the movement was your buddy Daryl, and now Daryl can't sit on anything for a month
Right.
because
Yep.
he's not a deer. So the name for these things in the psychology world is cognitive biases or logical fallacies. They're sometimes kind of both referred to. Logical fallacies is kind of technically a subset of cognitive biases. biases, but it's neither here nor there. So I know that we've talked about these a little bit in the past, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
our listeners have heard about these to some extent. But they're basically pattern matching shortcuts that we use as filters throughout the day. Um, Once again, sometimes helpful, but usually the if it's titled as a cognitive bias, it's usually something that's going to cause problems for you, or often actually keep you away from the actual truth of what's going on. And they're usually so unconscious that we don't even notice them, but they're there nonetheless.
Right.
Let me take a drink. Hold on.
Yeah, my before you read them off, I always think of like driving to work and you literally don't remember anything that happened on the way to work.
Mm-hmm.
Or the one that's always so powerful to me is sitting in a room and then the air conditioning shuts off,
Mm.
and you only notice that it was on when it changes, right? When the pattern changes, because your brain decided that's not important anymore. Don't listen to that, and it. I didn't make a decision to do that.
Right.
It's my brain being efficient and making some decisions that I don't know about, and so that applies then to not just driving to work and or listening to a sound that's constant like a babbling brook near my house. Um, it it starts to apply to watching a television show or having a conversation with a coworker.
But at the same time, if you were allergic to air conditioning, for example, you would notice if it's on because you would be tuned to listen to that thing because you know it's a thing that's an issue. So you'd be
Gotcha.
like you'd be alert, right?
Right.
Um, and so that's how our mind works. We have this really fascinating way of having a hard time seeing things or understanding concepts that we don't have words for, or that we don't have a shoebox to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one reason education is so important and why words really matter. I mean, sometimes you get into like these semantic discussions and people's like, it's just semantics. Well, sometimes, yeah, but sometimes there's a reason there's a different word for the thing. And just a quick side note on this, there have been several studies talking about how investigating how language impacts the perception of reality. Have we talked about this?
I don't think so, but this is a
Okay.
fascinating topic to me. Like color perception.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going with this. So
Mm-hmm.
there's like the Russian words for dark blue and light blue.
Yeah, they're different.
Um,
Yeah.
so Russian has separate words for dark blue and light blue. Not so dark and light are modifiers on the word blue for us.
Right.
So if you show multiple shades of blue, we'd say, oh, those are blue.
Right.
But a Russian person would have names for those different shades of blue, specific, just like we'd say blue or green. Um, so there's the test setup for this has been done several times, but probably the Russian and English because they're both really widely spoken languages. But a native Russian speaker, so what they do is they set up the computer screen has like two colors of blue blocks on the bottom row, like one slightly lighter than the other one, and then a block above, and you're supposed to pick left or right which one matches the block above. And so if you're a native English speaker, since you only have one color for blue, it's harder for you to discern. They
Wow.
found that it's
Yeah.
harder for you to discern what those colors, which one of those colors is the matching one. But if you are a Russian speaker, you're 10% faster, which is quite a bit. 10% faster at figuring out which one matches which blue, because your brain already has this separate track that's been worn down to say that is a light blue and that is a dark blue, even if it's
Wow.
just barely different. And then also on the other side, researchers worked with the Himba tribe in Namibia, and in their language, there's no word for blue, but they have lots of words for green. And they gave what they did is they show these these folks in the tribe like a bunch of squares of green, and one of the squares was actually like a light blue. And they said pick the one that's different, pick the blue color, and they're like, some of them completely failed the task.
Yeah.
Some of them were made, and very few were actually successful. And like, I looked at, I'll put the link in the show notes, but I looked at this screen. It's like, well, that's obviously blue. It's like
Right. Yeah.
clearly blue, but they couldn't tell the difference. And then they did the same thing with a bunch of squares of green, and one of those squares was barely a shade off, just barely. And the folks in the Himba tribe were like, immediately they knew which one was different. But
Wow.
get these Americans these squares. I've looked at the stupid squares. I don't know how long, and I swear they're all the same.
Right.
I
Yeah.
got my little digital eyedropper tool, and there is one different.
So that
Um,
when you're in it, you don't notice what is happening to you. That you have a blindness to some area, and you have a sensitivity to some area,
right,
right?
but
It's yeah, but you do. It's
right,
and that can happen with color, but it can happen with like words that we talk about, um, like sickness with, or
hmm,
what's our word for someone who's not from our country, or
yeah,
you know that.
yeah, and what it comes down to is if you have a name and a place in your brain to put that concept, then you can understand it and you can see it. Whereas before, you maybe weren't able to see it at all. And that's why when you get further and further into studies of a certain area, a topic, whatever it happens to be, whether it's water resource management or computer design or whatever it is, the further you get into that topic, the more vocabulary you have to learn because there are these minor distinctions that matter, but
Uh,
you don't like. I see like people see, oh, that's a laptop. It's like there's a lot more to it than laptop. There's tons of differentiation between different kinds. But
right.
if you don't know about it, it's going to be completely irrelevant to you, and you won't even notice it. So what I'm getting at is if it's important to know that what these cognitive biases are, and to give them names, we should give them names so that we can see them. And so we're going to look at a few cognitive biases because I feel it's important to know these because exactly because they can cause so many problems. And I think that it is the reason that so much of our country and the world is falling apart and not listening to science and not listening to what we know to be fact. They're just assuming that they know things. So, but I didn't want to look at these just in the sphere of like left right politics. That's because that's not really, we're not a politics podcast. But I wanted to. I mean, there's some bleed over, but I want to look at these as far as how these play out in churches
Hmm.
and how these play out in the life of people who are deconstructing and rethinking their faith.
Yeah.
So I'll go through these one at a time, and I have, let me see, one, two, three. I got 10.
All right.
So I don't know how long they'll take, but I'll just explain what each one is, and then after I just explain it, we can just talk about what we think what it is. And I've given them each humorous little names.
All right.
My attempt at humor, anyway. Unfortunately, Steve Martin is not always funny. Um, so the first one, and
Depends
this
on which
one's
Steve
one
Martin
that
you're talking about. One of them is hilarious. Sorry.
the first one that we've heard a lot about is the availability heuristic. And once again, heuristic is just a term meaning it's a mental shortcut, so a bias. And I've renamed this one the it's availability heuristic or the I only watch one news channel bias.
Okay.
Um, and what that is relying on information that is easily available or easily remembered or common as a basis for your decisions and for your beliefs. In other words, the more you hear about a thing or the more prevalent or the more you can remember a thing, the more prevalent you think that thing is. Like, I don't know anybody who's died of COVID, so it's no big deal.
Right.
Or the Broncos are the best football team in the world, just because everybody around me. That's all.
Yeah.
That's the only football team I see, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the reason I'm a Rockies fan, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's because that's the team that is in where I live. Um, and then I'm trying to think about. Uh, I feel like reading scripture, or going to a sermon based church.
Mm-hmm.
Often you're going to have one person who does a lot of the talking every
Yeah.
week.
Yep.
So there's some availability there that is it's like, what is that one person's perspective?
Yeah.
Um, but also, if you've heard a story like in Sunday school, and then you approach that story as an adult, are you going to come with like what you already think the story's about
Yeah.
and kind of miss the details?
Or if you, back to the church thing, if you are in a small church of a certain variety, and that's the only kind of church you ever hear about, do you think that that's the only church that exists or the only church that matters?
Hmm.
Or if you only hear about, well, so one of the reasons there's a lot of people still complaining about the stealing of the election is they say, I don't know anybody who voted for Biden. Therefore, nobody voted for Biden. Therefore, it's been stolen. Because I remember I saw one gal was saying in a video how you can drive from, like, she mentioned these two spots in Alabama, I think it was. She like, I could drive for 500 miles in Alabama and never see a Biden sign ever. All Trump signs. So all of Alabama thinks that everybody voted for Trump. you
Right.
know. So I mean that's the political side of things a little bit, but the
I, w-
same happens with churches.
I wonder if that will happen as well in your socio-economic rung, where
Mm-hmm.
your imagination for what rich and poor is, or even what
Mm,
someone's life is like,
yeah.
you'll put that, just what you're used to, on someone you see walking down the street, or you know, not to mention thinking a continent away,
Mm,
or whatever that is, where your picture of the world becomes, you just assume it's this everywhere. It's whatever I'm doing. Kind of
mm.
some flavor of that is what everyone's doing.
That's the norm. Yeah, like in our neighborhood, we have it. It's, I mean, it's admittedly a very white, like upper middle class neighborhood, and the Facebook page is like annoying and sad because there's a car parked outside that has rust on it. should we call the police? It's like,
Right.
just because everybody has nice cars around here doesn't mean that the rusty car means someone's trying to break into your house. I mean,
Yeah.
but
All the
if that's
people
all
that
I
I know
see,
that are nice have nice cars. I just saw a not nice car. Maybe they're not a nice person.
right, exactly. So that, and I'm gonna kind of go through these in an order as far
Okay.
as like how, in like in my mind as far as mentally how they kind of fit together. But that's kind of the basic, like the lowest level heuristic is that the things around me equal that's normal world.
Sure.
That is what's true. That is all I have. And in a world where you are maybe in a nomadic tribe or something where you have very little exposure to anything and you've maybe traveled 20 miles away in your lifetime, then this helps you. This is good for you because then you know what's truth, you know what's going on, you know what's fact. But in the world we have now where everything is just, it's just constant international everything all the time information, this is very dangerous one. Because
Huh.
if you think that the information that I hear is the only truth, then it's going to lead you to make some strange and unfortunate choices, I think.
And since these are like they're actually brain, you talked with software engineers. Sometimes it's a bug, but sometimes it's a feature, and it's the same
Yeah.
thing. This is a bug and a feature. The
Hmm.
feature is it's helped us survive. It helps us go through life. Um, and this isn't that some people are stupid. It's that
No, no, no,
their
no,
brain
no.
is doing what it's supposed to do. And this is one that so that it's happening to you, like it's currently happening to me. I do this.
Hmm.
I rely on
Yeah.
this. But this is one that has an easy remedy, I think, because it's exposure to things that are unusual for you.
Yeah.
And that's why travel what it does is it bursts that bubble a little bit, and
Hmm.
now you have new things to add to your imperfect view of the world, but it's a bigger view.
Right.
And you go eat at a vegan restaurant sometime, or you go hang out at you know a um, somewhere where you're gonna run into people who think nothing like you or look nothing like you,
Yeah.
or you even change the channel, or you flip to the radio, or you read something. That's a countermeasure to expand what your brain is relying on. It,
Absolutely.
it's more dangerous the smaller your kind of circle is, I think.
Yeah. And so to combat this one, you're absolutely right. You got to broaden our view of things, broaden our horizons, see different things, experience different things. But as we know, the problem with that is that can be uncomfortable because going. So most of these cognitive biases are in efforts to keep our um, cognitive dissonance at bay.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
are ways to on the negative side when it's a curse. It's because if I think that what's around me is the only reality and truth, and nothing else behaves otherwise, if I find out that that's wrong, that's going to mess with my concept of reality literally, and that is really uncomfortable.
Right.
So that tends to force you into the next cognitive bias, which is confirmation bias, which I've deemed the Bible only bias because
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. So it's the tendency to search for, interpret, focus on, and remember information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions, or to only expose yourself to things that you know you will agree with, and to run away from things that you know that or you are afraid that you might not agree with.
I
I
do this with
was
studies about coffee.
yeah,
So
find the ones that say that it's good, right?
if I start scanning and it's like coffee may cause cancer, I'm like skip.
Yeah,
Coffee may reduce your. Nah, I don't want to know. But then it's like you should drink more coffee. I'm like, let's see
I'm
what this
totally
has
gonna
to
read
say.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I Christian, I've been watching the Isaac Asimov series Foundation that's been on Apple TV recently,
Interesting.
and it's fascinating. It's fabulous. It's great. It's a great story.
Is Isaac
But
Asimov alive?
oh no, no, no.
Okay. Is it new?
This
Is
was
it a
written.
new? It's
Foundation
by.
was written in 1951. It's like a series of books, I guess.
Okay. But is it a new
But
show based on?
yeah, they just
Okay.
made a show about it, and the like really it's like a space opera type thing, right?
Cool. All right.
But in it, there's a planet of people where one of the main characters is from, and it is against the law to be curious about things. Like
Okay.
you'll be taught what you need to know, and if you're curious about what's different or what's out there, you are shunned from society or put in prison or kicked out of the group or whatever.
Okay.
That's like an entire society built around confirmation bias. Only learning what we know is safe.
Yeah.
And it's like I only watch news that agrees with my preconceived notions. I only read biblical scholars who agree with my preconceived notions.
But it's even less. So it's one thing because you can kind of do that on purpose a
Yeah.
little bit. Someone could say, "I only listen to Fox News,"
Hmm.
but the cognitive bias is. But when I do flip over to MSNBC, already kind of have told myself what I'm going to see there, and then so therefore that's what I see. Or
Right.
when I watch Fox News, I've already developed kind of a framework for what I believe happens on Fox News,
Hmm.
and so I'm going to turn it on and prove myself right.
Exactly.
And so, and that's not something I did on purpose. That's happening because my brain is trying to avoid that cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and that's why in the definition of the thing, the interpretation of the information is one of the items,
Yeah, so
because it's not
can
just
look at
in avoiding it.
two people can look at the same exact facts or the same article or the
Hmm.
same news story, and if they both had strong mental maps of the world that are very different,
Hmm.
they're not necessarily going to suddenly agree on just the information in the article.
Right. Yep. And so we kind of what we do see. We kind of filter like, what do I already believe? Does this new idea or piece of information confirm what I already think? Does it fit in the frame of what I already constructed? And if it does, I can accept it. If I not, I'm gonna ignore it and pretend it's wrong or doesn't exist.
Right.
And there's a great comic I'll stick in the show notes as well, by the comic writers chainsawsuit.com. That sounds right. Anyway,
That sounds way more dangerous than churchofchristSingles.com.
I haven't gone to the website, so I can't vouch for what's there. But this guy's sitting in front of his computer and he says, "I've heard the rhetoric from both sides. Time to do some of my own research on the real truth." And it shows the Google screen, and the first link says literally the first link that agrees with you with what you already believe, and he clicks on it and he goes, "Jackpot!" It's like, nailed it. The first link
Yeah.
that agrees with what I already believe. I've done my
If
research.
I've done this before where I'm Googling something and I know that I'm right about it, and the first 10 links disagree with me. And so I
Oh
just
yeah,
alter my search terms. I'm like, oh, my bad. What I meant
yeah,
was,
yeah. And I tell myself, well, I know what they're gonna say, so I don't need to click on that link, right?
yeah,
And I mean, this is so common in the Christian world. Well, in any world really, but I mean, we're talking about Christian world right here. But especially, this is what comes to a lot of the biblical stuff that I've been wrestling with and struggling with lately. As far as I've known that a lot of this critical scholarship stuff, like we were talking about with Trevor, I know that I've known that that's been around forever.
yeah.
Um, and I've heard Pete Enns in his in the Bible for Normal People podcast. He said in his, I think he said in the most recent episode, how when he went off to seminary, multiple people told him, "Be careful what you learn, so you don't lose your faith, or that make sure they don't teach you something that's wrong," implying everything that you know now is right, and it is the only right. And be
Hmm.
careful what you learn, and be careful what you read. Be careful what you put into your brain, because that might mess you up. And I've known that a lot of this stuff exists, but I've purposely avoided it. There's a pretty famous book called The Five Gospels. It's basically this group called the Jesus Project, I think it was called. They got together and sorted through the four Gospels, and well, they included the Gospel of Barnabas, I believe. Thomas, no, Gospel of Thomas. So the four Gospels we have in the Gospel of Thomas as well, and they to figure out what Jesus actually said. What of the red, what we would call the red words,
Okay.
which red words are actually red, which are kind of pink because maybe he said it, and which ones are gray because I don't think so, and which ones should be black because he definitely didn't say that. And I haven't read it yet, but it's been on my shelf for decades now, at least 25 years, and I haven't touched it because I've been afraid of what I might learn. And now that I'm learning all this stuff, I'm like, oh, maybe we should pull that out and see what it has to say. Not that it's always right, but I don't know what's in there.
That's
And we're just so good at that.
I've had a similar feeling, but it's where I will read something and I either have my guard up
Yeah.
and my suspicion is high, or I'm kind of allowing myself to be vulnerable and be like entrust myself to the book I'm reading. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it actually bothers me because um, sometimes it's like I've heard about someone's reputation, but that isn't my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden in my community, so and so is a bad guy, is identified as not in. Um, and there's maybe a book I was meaning to read, and all of a sudden, if I do get to it, I just read it suspiciously.
Mm.
Um, and I've shared this before. That this actually happened to me when I read the book With by Sky Jitani. Now one of my favorite books in retrospect, and one of my favorite Christian writers. But it took me most of the book. I was just so suspicious of this guy, probably because of a foreign sounding name, probably
Mm.
because the there were a few things that just I thought, man, am I being tricked here?
Yeah.
Right. And a similar thing, I read Preston Sprinkle recently, and I know of his reputation on one side of his argument, and so I have the same thing where I'm like, my guard was up even though I didn't really want it to be. I wanted to be approaching something um, without preconception, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't be
Mm. Yeah.
be objective because I was already my brain was trying so hard to steer it to where I know it was supposed to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, we can try to pull ourselves out of these, but it's really hard. But at least noticing that you're doing that is very valuable, I think. But with the confirmation bias thing, I think once again, the solution, at least partially, comes down to exposing yourself to more stuff and partially seeing that it's not necessarily going to destroy things because you know some information that you didn't know before. Um, anyway, so confirmation bias is a pretty common one that we lean on heavily, and we really should probably be careful when we do. Moving on to that is shared information bias. This is kind of a new one. I was researching some of these. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of these things, so I actually had to pick and choose. And there's more that are relevant. But so shared information is a bias, or the you all know this Bible story already bias, is the tendency for group members, specifically group members, to spend much more time and energy discussing information that all the members are already familiar with, instead of information that only some members are aware of or that is completely new to everybody.
Okay,
And
so if we're in a group of people, we're going to be more likely to focus on something that we all share in common. Is that
that you all already know about, or that you all already agree with.
interesting?
Yeah, because it's comfortable. It's comfort thing. So like I remember we had a Super Bowl party at our place about 10 years ago, and the folks who last time the Broncos were in the Super Bowl and they like fumbled on the 2 yard line or whatever. Sad. It was so sad. And I'm not even a football fan. It was sad. But we had the Super Bowl party here, and the people who had the orange jerseys on, who were like the super fans, that were just sitting there discussing great plays in the past, great games in the past, great players of the past, and not that it was about the past, but even some of in the current time. But they were all discussing things that everybody knew. No, there was no like, hey, did you hear about that thing? And they're like, no, I never heard about that. It's like, yeah, totally. And they're like trading the stories back and forth. Or at church, that's why I called it the you all know this Bible story already bias, because at church we teach the same stuff over and over, over and over. And we even have altar calls, if you want to call them that, or like invitations to get baptized on evenings when literally everybody is a Christian and has been for 50 years.
Sure. Yeah.
And but you still got to have the thing, and but it's we end up talking about the stuff we're all comfortable with, and as soon as somebody brings in a new thing or a concept or an idea that's different, that's avoided. Not always necessarily shunned, but it's avoided and treated as possibly dangerous, because once again, it gets that discomfort in your gut.
So I'm very familiar with times when a group has done something and it impacts me. Like um, I'm trying to figure out how this is. This almost like a form of groupthink. Like it's not
Yeah,
necessarily
absolutely.
that um, what our brains are trying to do is what's going to make this group, what's going to be the least awkward, what's going to have me be accepted, and every person in the group is doing that. And then the net effect is you have a group that tends towards um, comfort.
Hmm.
And
Well, I mean, to be fair, every almost every group tends towards comfort. It's just how groups go. I mean, even groups who are very open and left leaning, they derive comfort from being open and left leaning.
right, yeah. And um, I've I saw this recently. I'm trying to figure out like if it's the social part of us, like the studies where actors will pretend like nothing wrong is happening, and one
Mm.
person who's not in on it, is in a room that's on fire or something, and everyone
Right.
else pretends like it's fine, and so
Yeah.
they
Uh-huh.
also that they so much so that they're ignoring what they see and experience.
Yeah.
Um,
That is coming up in three.
okay, that's a different one.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
interesting.
very there's a so they're very very similar though.
This one is one I didn't. I'm glad that I have a name for it now, because now that you said that, I'm thinking back. Like, yeah, when I hang out with these people, this is what we talk about. When I
Hmm.
um, hang out in a different subgroup at work, this is what I talk about. And then at church, um, nobody is saying the rules out loud, but somehow I know what they are,
Hmm.
um, and I stay like in as close to the middle of the lines as possible. Um,
Yeah, and I think that that's fine. There's nothing wrong with discussing things that you already agree on, or already know about, or information you are familiar with. I think that in the context of what this podcast is all about and what we're going through faith wise, you and I, is that the danger can be when we are in a church or in a group that only does that and is afraid and wary of new information or new ways of looking at things. That
it's a
when
total
that happens,
missing,
it becomes an echo chamber.
and it's a lowest common denominator thing on accident,
Mm, yeah.
because the the idea is some people in the group have different information or more information, but if you all share common information, that's what you're going to focus on.
Yeah.
When imagine you know the Bible study where the person who has a completely different perspective because they grew up in a different place, or they're a different kind of person, or they studied something, like that's what would be the most valuable to share with the group,
Hmm.
because you learn something, or you
Yeah.
you engage with something, or you disagree about something. But what we tend, yeah, interesting. Shared information bias means we tend to share the thing that we all knew, and we don't leave that room for what some of us didn't know. That's interesting.
Right. And closely tied to that's the next one, the illusory truth effect, which I really this resonated with me. It's the tendency of people to identify a statement as true, or anything, to identify a thing as true simply because they've heard it before, irrespective of its actual truthfulness.
That's a
So
good one.
basically, repetition equals truth. And so
Illusory.
I
Yeah.
called this one that's how I've always been taught fallacy. Because if I've always been taught that way, it therefore must be right.
Or just I've heard that once. Oh, I've heard that once. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
Or
the second time
everybody's
I heard it.
saying.
Therefore,
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I do that on
But
this
in a
podcast
church
all the time.
context, you hear enough times that, you know, I can't think of a good example. Like you hear that something is supposed to be done a certain way. Enough times you think, well, that's the only way to do it. That's true.
Yeah, I think maybe what I've heard the most is some kind of statement about the lifestyle of not being a Christian,
Yeah, yeah.
or like what the family who only comes to worship and doesn't come to class, what that means about them.
Right.
Um, you don't have to hear that 100 times. It doesn't have to be every Sunday or every year. Um, but you hear something like, "Oh, et cetera, et cetera." Maybe they deserved what happened to them. After all,
Mm.
they were kind of on the on shaky ground, and it will quickly make you think that that's the way the universe works.
Yeah. Or one thing I heard a lot when I was younger, in high school specifically, was, well, even now, you like trans people and gay LGBT people in general are sexual deviants who are basically pedophiles. So
Right.
you hear that enough, you just think that's true. I mean, regardless of whether or not you think it's wrong, you think that they are, in addition to being wrong, they are also a pedophile. They're
Right.
and,
Or
and
even
so
like other people don't baptize, or other
yeah,
people don't teach, scripture, or they don't, etc. Um, you don't go check. Um,
yeah. When we left the Church of Christ, somebody told me that, like, well, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to one of those mega churches where you get to believe whatever you want to believe? Wait a minute, that's not how mega churches work.
right.
That's not how hardly any church works. Um, but once again, it's the keeping yourself in a bubble and ignoring what's around you, and sharing that information bias, and it leading to the illusory truth effect, which is all kind of part of the Dunning Kruger effect, which is the next one.
Dunning
And
Kruger.
uh, this one is I think I've mentioned this one before. It could be summed up as, we don't know how much we know because we don't know how much others know. In other words, incompetent people in a given subject.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay. In a given subject, incompetent people have a narrow view of the subject and therefore overestimate their own competency in comparison to others, because they think that they know all there is to know because they don't know that there is much to know. They don't know what they don't know.
That's
So
so
they think
great.
that they know it all.
I want to know if Dunning was the one who didn't know anything, or Kruger. Yeah.
That's funny.
So it's it's almost ignorance is bliss. It's like the confidence of someone who knows nothing is high.
Right. But on the other side, people who are very competent they have a much broader view of the subject, and therefore they know how much they don't know. And so they underestimate themselves in comparison to other people.
Wow.
Even though they're the expert, they think that their knowledge is below average because their sphere is other academics or whatever in that subject, and they know how much is out there. But people who on the other side who don't know anything about it have a very narrow view, and but they're like, I know all I know about this thing is something I know, therefore I've got it all, and I'm beyond anybody else in this subject, or at least I'm above average.
That's so interesting. That
And this is like, it's like anti-vaxxer 101 right here. If I have done my own research, quote unquote, determined that I know what is in a vaccine, therefore I know everything about how vaccines work and how they should or shouldn't be applied to the world. Whereas a immunology and virology or whatever would know that there's a lot they don't know.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't know if this is the Dunning-Kruger effect, but um, the confident people, you can be more confident and direct about a really clear black and white statement
hmm
that's short than you can um, something that is nuanced. So
yeah,
it's easier to say the Bible clearly says you should not fish, and if the other one says, well, no, what it said is you should not fish on that side, you should switch and fish on the other side. It is
right.
like that's too long. You're talking too much. You just lost me because direct is you can say that boldly and with confidence, um, and the as we increase in maturity in faith, I think that often many subjects become more gray. There's more
hmm
room for, well,
Yeah,
it's not as black and even the Bible I don't believe is that black and white. Or
yeah,
I think the black and white misses some of what's happening here. Let's look into it. That's like you can't put that on a pamphlet, you know. So the transmission of person A in the Dunning Kruger effect to person B is part of the problem. The person who is overestimating their ability doesn't need any help, and the person who is underestimating their ability isn't going to offer any help.
right. Yeah, and so I've called this one the I've read the Bible fallacy. Like, I read the Bible once or parts of it, so I know what we should be doing. And I know how the world should work and how Christianity should be. And I've never looked at it again, and I don't understand the complexity in the mass world of scholarship and debate and confusion and nuance that's out there because I think I've got it figured all out. And then you have the people who are like Trevor who know lots more than we do, and he knows how much he doesn't know, and so he's going to be less forceful about saying something is right or wrong because he knows that we don't know
Right.
necessarily sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that ties into another fallacy that I'll get to later about like appealing to authority. But it's those people. The dangerous combination is people who know a little bit about a subject and think that they're the expert, and turn that into a way to control people.
Hmm.
And actually, this is the next one. It's confidence bias,
Oh.
and you can probably figure out what that is. So if you are really uh, really tied up into um, uh, the Dunning Kruger effect, and you think that you're an expert in the Bible or whatever religion, society, then you're going to be very confident that you know that thing and that you are right, and people therefore are going to follow you because you're so confident.
Yeah. This happened to me in elementary school, and it was so embarrassing. I can't remember if I've told the story about the guitar strings. Have I told you this?
No, you told me about the 12-string guitar you found, but not the strings.
Oh, this was back in. I had been given I believe, like a mini, child-sized guitar when I was in fourth or fifth grade, and I was learning how to play Tom Dooley on it with an A, and there's maybe
Nice.
a C, Um, and
And you
man, did I
had
think I was great,
mm-hmm.
like, yeah, nailing this guitar stuff. Went to like a school function uh, that had like teams that split up to do trivia. And one of the questions was, how many strings does a guitar have? And I was like, everyone, hey, listen, I have a guitar. I've been playing five. Five fingers, five strings.
No
And I
way.
was so confident that I convinced all of the people, including the people who knew I was wrong. He was like, go around the table. Everyone said six. I said five confidently. So that was what we all went with. Obviously, there are 6 strings on a guitar. Unless it's a 12 string, but there aren't 5. Um, and I do that all the time, and so I've slowly learned to see it that, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll even warn people. Now it applies in meetings, usually at work. I'll say, by the way, sometimes my confidence is indirectly proportional to how right I am. So um, it's
That's
so
great.
interesting.
See, but you notice that in yourself, and that's good.
Yeah, but I don't. I know that I do it, but I don't know exactly when I do it. So I
Oh,
just know
okay.
it could be
Yeah.
lurking below the surface. Just about any time.
Yeah. So the confidence bias is exactly that. Well, it's like the other side of that. It's like the people who are around you, who would have died, like thrown their souls on their own spear because Nathan told me that 5 strings are on a guitar.
Yeah.
Because we're attracted to confidence regardless of its validity, and we prefer a bold lie to a hesitant truth.
Huh.
So if you are peak Dunning Kruger effect and you are sure that you know about 5 string guitars and you start a movement around 5 string guitars and you are so confident people are going to follow you to the ends of the earth, and because when we're in danger, evolutionarily speaking, or history speaking, whatever, when we're in danger, we instinctively look for the most confident person to tell us what to do
Huh.
because we assume they know what they're talking about.
They must know. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
they're
must know.
confident.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
so, go ahead.
our media that we consume on the left and the right and the middle is based, a lot of it, listening to people who are very confident, say their side
Hmm.
very confidently, with no room um, for error. So you'll,
Right.
especially like cable news, even if you have 2 people who disagree, they're both going to disagree. The people who end up going on TV or talk radio, confident in their
Hmm. Yeah.
positions, and when we have politicians, um, they are they even need to remind themselves to be confident and to not waver.
Or at
Um,
least pretend to be
yeah, it
confident.
doesn't even have
Yeah.
to. They could have a nuanced belief kind of under the surface, but it's going to be important for them to convey to the public a much more confident view,
Hmm.
and so that's who we also tend to elect.
Yeah. And something I just learned a few couple years ago is um, con artist is actually short for confidence artist.
A confidence man. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
confidence man. Because I mean, we use that term con. We know exactly what that means. They're tricking you by being confident.
So
Because
you don't even see it.
confident people, yeah,
Yeah.
confident people can seriously manipulate other people around them.
This when I at the early pandemic accidentally got into magic tricks somehow.
What?
Um, what that is all about, most of the
Oh
misdirection
yeah.
is learning how to almost believe that you're doing the thing that they think you're doing. Because most magic tricks are, I'm pretending to do a thing, but
Hmm.
doing a different thing and surprising you at the end.
Yeah, and we all know
You
you're doing a thing.
you think that I have a coin in this hand, and so when I wave it and then show you an empty hand, you're surprised. I know that I'm doing a different thing, and so someone who's very good technically at the movements, but bad at the confidence, isn't gonna like. I'm really good at like. I did it like
Oh, that was good. Whoa,
right.
you're good.
So I can do the technical thing, but what a good magician does is they're like staring, and they're
Yeah, all
everything
about the
else.
show.
It's all about just everyone's gonna believe right what you want them to believe.
Yeah.
So that's a manipulation of a con man or a magician or something is manipulating um, your desire to follow that confidence. Or even the best telemark scam phone calls I get
Mm,
are the ones that just launch right into, oh hey, oh yeah, how's it going? So I was just calling you back. It's like, oh, you were okay. Well, let's like I'll
yeah.
listen. to those ones that just launch in like, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
you just invited me into your home,
Hmm.
as opposed to,
Confidence.
yeah.
Yeah. So I've called this one the "I'm voting for Trump" fallacy because,
Man, that guy must know what he's doing because he has a lot of
right,
confidence.
he's
Yeah,
the most confident person
a lot of confidence.
in the Oval Office in a very long time. Not that that confidence has to be grounded in anything. People don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
They know it's not grounded in anything real, but they don't care. They just are. They want someone who is confident in leadership because it makes them feel more comfortable. And this is
Hmm.
all coming back to comfort and avoiding the cognitive dissonance. Um, yeah, and so in church, we've mentioned the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast a few times. The Mark Driscoll was a very still is a very confident person. I mean, I've never heard a thing him that man say a thing that is not oozing confidence.
Sure.
He never was a member of a church before he started Mars Hill and spread it to like all 50 states or something crazy and
That's a lot of
had
confidence.
50,000 members, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of guts, and people he figured out what he was doing, but I mean he's a smart guy, but he twisted and manipulated and hurt people, and they followed him because he was confident. And one of the little phrases in the intro to that to every single episode of the podcast is a quote, a soundbite from somebody saying that there's a certain group of Christians who would prefer a narcissist in charge of their church, and this is exactly the why. Because we are more comfortable when someone who thinks that they've got it all together is in charge, and that's a scary thing.
Hmm. And they like you're gonna hear more like confirmation bias too from that kind of person. So that
Oh yeah.
one of the best things about a narcissist, or maybe a natural reason why a church could eventually either foster a narcissist or kind of create one, is they're going to be confident and we're attracted to that. But our identity is tied to their identity, which is tied, which is something that they're going to be constantly having to elevate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes eventually what you get is we are correct, we are doing it right, we are better than other people, and that feels good. I'm like, hey, I'm in the right spot. You're in the right spot. This is
And
it.
don't listen to anybody else.
We don't
You
need
know.
to. The
Yeah.
yeah,
Either you don't need to, or it's dangerous.
right, yeah,
So it's like almost forced confirmation. Um, I got four more to go. I'll try to go through them real quick here. So the next one is conformity bias. Um, it and that's kind of it's almost impossible to see when our community can't or won't see it because we are driven, and this could also be under the realm of groupthink a little bit.
yeah,
So conformity bias is all about the pressure to conform, and not just the pressure, I should say, but it's also around the idea that if something is happening that is wrong, let's go back to the Mark Driscoll situation. If Mark Driscoll was often very verbally abusive to people, making fun of them, really mean, in front of everybody else.
yeah,
If everybody around me feels like that's okay, or if I think the people around me think it's okay, then I'm going to go along with. I'm not going to notice it necessarily.
wow,
I'm going to laugh and think, "Oh, that's a funny joke. He's being so funny, ha ha." But we can be convinced of an idea, or be convinced to ignore an idea or a thing that's happening because the group is okay with it.
yeah. That's really strong.
Yeah.
That I've worked in places where I'm the new employee. Suddenly, the boss is screaming at somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing you do is you look around, like, and if everyone else is just like typing away, which is what happened in my case, it's like, oh, this is just, I guess this is work. This is what it's like to work.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and if you are in that kind of situation and you start to have differing thoughts, you can have two choices. can either speak up and then cause a disturbance in the group, and then you'd be seen as a threat and possibly shunned or kicked out, or you can keep your views secret, and then end up emotionally and mentally drained and beaten down because you've got this different belief, and that's a lot of stress. I mean, I know from experience, recent experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to eventually lead you either to change your beliefs back to what the group thinks or to leave that group. And I think this is where a lot of deconstruction people going through deconstruction, where kind of the breaking point is, they have lived in this conformity bias world, like not literally not even seeing things. Like I grew up in a church where women were not allowed to speak. And it wasn't till about a year and a half, 2 years ago, talking to my wife, that she was explaining like how that made her feel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did I not see that? I mean, my entire 45 years before that, I'd been around churches where women were not allowed to speak and were treated as less than. And it never clicked with me that that was going on,
Wow.
because everybody thought it was okay. It was the right thing to do. But
Yeah.
then she's taught with weeping to me about this. Like, I'm like, first of all, how have we never had this conversation before? Um, but when I realized it, it was a huge shock to my brain and my system,
Right.
and
Yeah,
I had to do something about it.
and so then in that moment, now you return and you can't not see it now. You didn't see it before because of conformity bias, but now you do see it.
Yeah,
And then now you're looking at people who can't see a thing that you can see,
right.
which is what a
And all
lot
they
of
can,
political stuff feels like, or religious stuff feels like recently, is like, how can you not see this? Or like, man, why are we okay with this? And unfortunately, like a lot of people who are deconstructing, the the only choice they're given is to remove themselves,
yeah,
and so what's left is the group that continues to be uniform, or
yeah,
continues to maybe not see that, when right, it's like it's gonna, you boil out, and what's left is just concentrated what was there before, you know.
absolutely. Because when you are in it, you just can't see what's going on, and often it's an experience. Like me talking to Christy, it's an experience that will jolt you out of something. Or with often when I talk to folks who have family members who are in the LGBTQ community, they like they hadn't thought about it. It's like it wasn't even an issue until their son came out to them or whatever,
Yeah.
and suddenly they have to really quickly shift perspectives and figure out what's really going on here. What am I going to believe? And so you can't make an entire congregation have an experience to shock them out of not seeing what has always been there, and to have your eyes opened, I think is a very it's a it's a great thing, and I'm thankful for the times that I have had my eyes opened. And I've said before how I love to find out that I've been wrong, because when I find out that I've truly been wrong is when I actually learn. If I don't know that I'm wrong, I'm not learning things usually.
One of
I'm not
the
able to change.
Yeah, I feel like, one of these things that makes you blind to seeing that, right? That, like, you cannot go down that path, and you can't stumble on change, or learning, or a group blind spot. And something that I feel like it sometimes takes that deep emotional um, impact to a group for that. And I think the best example I've seen of this are the child loss awareness bumper, or
Hmm.
what's that called? Licensing. Do you know what
Hmm.
I'm talking about? Um, there's a, I don't know if it's just Colorado, but there's like a custom license plate you can get that's just child loss awareness. That's all it says.
Hmm.
And the implication is this is maybe someone who lost a child died, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And they just have and what will happen to me for a embarrassingly short amount of time, but is I see the world through the eyes of someone who has lost a child, maybe for 30 minutes.
Hmm.
And what I
Yeah.
see is, oh my goodness, how hard this thing would be to see. Or, oh, this thing that I talk about all the time, how hard would that be if if it was me in that situation? Um, and it's just a little poke to like, oh man, just because we all have this shared blindness doesn't mean we shouldn't occasionally think about the people who are not having the same experience as the rest of us when we talk about the holidays or when we talk about you
Yeah.
know whatever that is.
I was also thinking about how I've spent some time with homeless groups here in town or in the past. And before I met some of these people who are living on the streets, basically, I didn't notice them as much. I mean, you see the guy in the corner, and you're like, guy just wants beer money or whatever.
Yeah.
But and when you meet them, you start seeing them more often and seeing them as people and understanding. I mean, I can't empathize with their situation because I've never been homeless. But I mean, knowing that person, it's like now my eyes are open. I see the thing now.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the person that I just wish wasn't there anymore. I see that they're a human being and they need help and they need attention in some way.
Yeah, that's a
So, go ahead.
homeless. This is a tiny tangent, but homelessness is one example of a extremely dehumanizing situation
Yeah.
that works both ways. So people who are homeless start to feel invisible and kind of even act like react to their new reality, which is of
Mm-hmm.
extremely lowered status. And then people who aren't homeless, like yeah, the filter is there that you often won't even notice that person,
Mm-hmm.
and it feeds back. So that person is used to you not noticing them, and has a lowered self uh, like worth and state. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting. A thing about Jesus was the stopping and the noticing
Mm.
when the whole story's momentum is to not stop and to not notice a thing.
Like the woman
Um,
who touched his cloak, right?
like yeah, but
He was
more,
on a way to a thing. Yeah.
he was on the way to a thing, but there's just there are multiple stories of Jesus noticing the person who he should not have noticed because nobody else was noticing them. That something else bigger was going on. Someone more important was saying something,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so that we have an example of what does a life look like who that breaks down some of those filters and um, challenges some of those conformities or looks through some of those things that our brains have wired us to ignore.
Yep. 100%. So the next one's the last one about that I kind of classed as things that the churches struggle with, and then the last two are kind of deconstruction related. So the last one is church wise is I've noticed that when talking to people who are have not left our church or our church tradition, or others who have been like others that I observe like on Twitter or Facebook or whatever who have gone through situations like this. It's kind of the last ditch effort to say your new beliefs are wrong is to say this is how we've always done this. And that's the appeal to history fallacy. And the fact that that's the fallacy that actions, behaviors, and policies are acceptable because they've always been acceptable. And like I said this in a podcast many months ago, just because something has been done a long time doesn't make it right. It just makes it historical.
Mm-hmm.
And just things like, in America, the fact that the president has always been a man, we assume that the president always has to be a man. Then it's a man's job. Where it's not the case. But
Right.
with churches, that's used for almost everything. And that's that's like I said, it was kind of the last ditch effort of people that I've talked to, especially when it comes to LGBTQ stuff. Is you're going against thousands of years of orthodoxy. Well, I don't really care about orthodoxy. I just want to know what's right. And so if we assume that just because we've always done it that it's right is makes things okay, um, that's completely wrong. Truth,
There's,
it's just things should be right the sin on their own, not because they've been done a long time.
I think the hardest part about that for me is, the subset of that is continuity. Like, um, it's hard to see the things that we've always done and that we're still currently doing
Mm-hmm.
from an outside perspective. But it's really easy for us to see the things that we've always done, but then we've recently changed,
Mm.
like slavery,
Yeah,
Christian acceptance of slavery in the U.S.,
yeah,
or um, um, segregation, right? That's something that while we were having those arguments, it the appeal to history was like made the most sense.
yeah.
Um, but now that seems ludicrous to us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the problem is it's only visible in hindsight. Like
Yeah,
right now, the stuff that we're still doing, or the whatever that is, whether it's in our society, you know, um, I don't know, incarceration. It's acceptable for us to lock people away for a large proportion of their time for
right.
sometimes small crimes. Um, but they did it. We that could one day seem just barbaric to us, that was our solution, was time out, but forever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it just seems normal because it's not just historical, but it's both. It's like, um, conformity bias plus historical, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that the appeal to history fallacy, the things that like we've always done it this way, they are phrases meant to encapsulate lots of, like as a shorthand for lots of, like the fact that we've done it this way proves that I'm sure lots of people have thought it through. It's time tested and tried, all that kind of thing. But you can't. I mean, that's why it's a logical fallacy. You can't logically say that just the length of something existing makes it okay.
Right.
And we often are pushed to accept that, especially in traditional type of uh, uh, environments like churches, where there's lots of tradition. Just being told that it's been done that way a long time is enough for some people. But my what I'm trying to say is it shouldn't be enough.
And
If it's truth,
the Jesus's example is, you have heard it said, but I say to you,
yep,
right? Um, so the I'm telling you a new thing
yep,
is challenging. They're like, wait a minute, but we've always done it this way.
mm-hmm,
One of the problems is, like, the reasons things survive for a long time is often because they're very useful, or maybe they are correct, or maybe they, like, there are reasons that some beliefs or, structures or whatever survive. And the
yeah,
problem is those reasons aren't all good reasons.
right.
So
There might be some good reasons.
the existence of a tree could mean it is the most suited for this area. If it's 200 years old, that means this about it. But it can't stand that reasoning shouldn't ever stand on its own.
Right.
It could be like, well, yeah, that's the reason I haven't questioned this is it's been going on for a long time. So I'll put a lot of trust in that side of things. But I don't think it should be slamming the door for. Um, therefore, it's not worth looking at that, or therefore we
Yeah.
couldn't have been wrong about that for that long. Because humans have been wrong about some pretty important things for a long time.
Yeah, maybe it's all wrapped up in confidence bias because we have maybe the way we've been doing that thing for all that long is it's been benefiting the authorities,
Yeah.
and they're getting something out of it, and therefore we're going along with that because we've always done it. But it really is just because somebody's making money off of us because they're confident and we believe them.
Like
You know?
worldwide acceptance of slavery is like mostly if the world ended now, it'd be like 100% of U.S. or American. Man, I keep human. I assume there are humans that aren't Americans, but I don't know any. Like the human one of exploiting other humans
Yeah.
as just part of our normal society. Not that I'm a Marxist or anything, but I could be convinced pretty easily to be. Right? The like our but our capacity to accept that exploitation is boundless.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and it's just what's happening around us, and it's normal, right? And
Yeah.
it's I think about this all the time when I like stay late at work and there's a cleaning lady there, and I'm like,
Mm.
how much are they paying that cleaning lady?
Yeah.
Because I bet it's not the same that I'm making. But we both have to eat and sleep and have families, and you know,
And she's the one who goes to work at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m.
yeah,
and
she
works
goes
till
and works
4.
all night.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, that's of course I worked hard, right?
Yeah.
No, she is, like we're just used to like that. Yeah, that's how things fall, and it's her fault and my fault, right? And that's
Hmm.
we should be okay with that.
She
But
should have been born in the right country.
yes, she's speaking a different language with different parents,
Yeah.
and you know, sometimes I think it's good to say like, is that actually is that just? Um,
Mm.
and the answer could be yes. Uh, that we've always done this way, and it's a very good, useful thing. But I don't think it should be the end of a question.
Yeah. So the second to last one is it's for people. This is intended for people who are on the deconstruction journey and who are having a hard time giving up on some things that they probably should move on from because they know that they should. It's the sunk cost fallacy. This one's a
Mm.
pretty well known one in
Oh
the world,
man,
or otherwise known as the "I've invested so much time in this church" fallacy.
yeah, this one's hitting close to home.
Yeah, it's justifying the increased investment of any time, money, whatever, in a decision based upon the cumulative prior investment, despite new evidence suggesting that the decision was probably wrong. So, I've spent so much time on this, I can't stop now.
I mean, this
And
is one that's really hard for humans. Just like our brains don't work this way.
yes,
So this is why, like the one of the maybe most common ways this hurts us is when we go to Las Vegas, as we all do. Just kidding. I'm not. I hate Las Vegas. I hate gambling, but
I do too.
I'm using this example, even though I don't actually identify with it. And you put the coins in the slot machine, or you bet on the things that you do. You can't do magic tricks there; they don't like that. Um, and what you think is, if I have spent 100 minutes putting coins into this machine, I should put one more coin in,
Mm-hmm.
even though those 100 coins did not buy you any improved chance of winning something.
Right.
It's still a very bad idea to put that coin in. But you start to sit in that one. You could even get in a fight because you've been sitting in the one slot machine. and you get up and someone else sits there and you're like, wait a minute, I have sunk a lot of cost into
Yeah.
that machine.
And you
You're
feel like that if you leave, you're going to lose those 100 coins.
Yeah, not just the one.
Right.
What you're actually doing is saving your one coin, but what it feels like you're doing is sacrificing all those. And man, what I think about, like, man, if the elders called me from the church, or like maybe I just show up and volunteer to teach class, like I want to sink more cost into a place that I know, it's not
Hmm.
welcome, but also it's not going to be fruitful for anybody. I'm not going to,
Yeah.
nobody's going to have a fun time if I'm ever allowed to do communion again.
Yeah.
That's both that's a threat and a promise. No one's
Yeah.
having a
So
good time, but
you feel like if you walk away from that slot machine that you're losing the 100 coins, but in reality, you've already lost the 100 coins.
yeah,
They're gone. That
they're gone.
and at that church, the time is gone, the money that you put in, the effort you spent, it's in the past.
Man,
Putting more into something that's broken is not going to fix it. And so if the right choice is to move on, the phrase you've heard before, don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a long time making it.
that's hard.
And it is because we have this feeling in our deep in our soul that if I walk away from a thing, then I have wasted the time that I'm there and I've lost all of that information and all that time and all that effort. And I felt like you were saying, I felt that hardcore when we left our church because I had put so much of my life into that church and I felt like walking away from it was giving up or losing. I mean, insert sad thing, you know. But moving, I it got to the point where Christy and I both realized that you know, continually pushing on this thing that's not moving is just wearing us out, and it's not helping anything.
Yeah.
So,
How do you?
I'm not telling people that you have to leave the church you're at. I'm just saying, try to evaluate like all of these things we've talked about before, all these biases. Figure out where you are, and are you staying just because you've always been there?
Yeah, or just yeah. I mean, and for me, it's more like the people who just dwell on, like, man, dwell on the sunk cost part of it.
Yeah.
Like, that I'm not investing the new stuff, but it's hard not to think about, oh man, the years or whatever, or effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you can look at those things positively. I mean, you probably made a lot of difference. I know I made a lot of difference in people's lives when I was there. That's one reason people were sad that I left. But those are not in the trash. They're just I'm just moving on.
There's this. I think a part of this too is that, like, one of the evolutionary reasons or survival reasons why this is a thing is that pain registers more than pleasure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are more taught to avoid
Loss
the
aversion.
the pain thing. Yeah. So um, we so a loss. So what could be happening is you've sunk a cost, but you've got a reward that's equal or better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the loss, if someone was like, "Hey, I'm going to take your car," you'd be like, "What?" But give you a much better car. The it's We're going to do a bad job of evaluating how much the loss is compared to how much the gain is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're going to focus on how do I not lose, but also that loss just reverberates more than the gain.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave it there. I had another one, but it doesn't really quite fit in.
Oh, what?
Well, I could talk about it if you really want
Is
to.
there
But
cognitive bias about finishing lists? Sermons with only two items in them instead of 3 bullet points.
like I can talk about it and I can cut it out if it doesn't make sense.
All right.
So this last one, I'm thinking now I should have put it before the sunk cost fallacy because I feel it's like we kind of wrapped something up there, but I'll say this one anyway. Maybe I can move it. So this last one is survivorship bias, and this is directed at churches who have lost people to deconstruction.
Interesting.
And this is I rephrase this one: the "you left because you're broken" bias. The survivorship bias is the phenomena of concentrating on those who survived the thing instead of those who did not as evidence of what works best. So,
This is
classic
how
example.
every superstition ever has come about, in my opinion. But what's
Yeah,
the
it could be.
example?
So, classic example. I think this was in one of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I forget which one. Maybe a podcast. Some bombers in World War II. I think it was the German theater. You know this story?
I think so. Is it about evaluating where bullets are in a fuselage?
Yeah. So these bombers would go out to do their bombing runs, and some would get shot down, some would not get shot down. And so they would fly. They'd come back. The ones that made it did not get shot down. Came back to the base, and they would look at like where all the bullets were, and they're like, "Oh, we gotta put more armor on that section of the plane." So they
That's where,
started doing
yeah,
that, and it wasn't helping. And somebody came in and realized this is like a statistician named Abraham something. I forgot the guy's name. He came in and said, "Okay, let's track where these bullets are hitting." And so he started like tracking on like a diagram where the bullets were hitting. Like, if the plane came back alive, they'd track where those bullets were. And he's like, what you need to do is not put armor where the bullets are, because those are proof that you can get hit there and still survive.
right.
What we need to do is put more armor where the
Where the
bullets
bullets aren't.
aren't.
So fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is where the planes who didn't come back got hit.
Right.
So if we want to make sure that extra sure that these are going to survive next time, let's beef up the areas that the bullets are not hitting. And it
Oh
seems
man.
counterintuitive. So where I'm coming from with talking to church leaders
Yeah.
is people deconstructing, leaving churches, leaving denominations, whatever. The tendency is to think, not to think what went wrong with them, but why did they're gone, forget them. But like the people here, well, they must be staying here because there's lots of good Bible teaching. So let's double down on the Bible teaching, or let's double down on the being extra right about stuff. I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah. It would happen
And here,
if you had, COVID impacted churches dramatically in the U.S. And
yeah,
it's the equivalent of if you polled the people who are left about what is most important to them or what they like the most or what they don't like the most, who are in your church right now.
yep,
You are looking at where the bullets hit the planes that survived.
that's a better example. Yeah, yeah,
So
that's good.
the what you're going to hear, and you're not going to do a poll because that's weird and anti-biblical. Jesus didn't poll people. Um, uh, so what's actually going to happen is you're going to get compliments. Compliments are the bullets in the fuselage in this example.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
what's going to happen is you're going to be complimented about, oh, I'm so glad that you had that strong teaching about X, or
Mm-hmm.
what we love about this church is that we don't apply, conform to the X. Um, and so that's what's happening is survivorship. What you're not hearing is maybe more important than what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And not that the people who left have like more access to the truth but especially if you have a church that it has changed demographic, like a lot of new people,
Yeah.
with people leaving or just people left, right? And you've concentrated the group. That's when, you know, this that story needs to be, you know, um, sent in pamphlets, to every church leader, because it's what you're going to hear is we're doing everything correct.
Right.
because if it's the people who are left are the people who are either agree with you 100% or don't mind the stuff that was painful.
Yeah. So in the plane analogy, if the people who left are the ones who got shot down,
Right.
you need to go find those planes and figure out what happened
Yeah.
instead of sitting in your bunker or in your base, in your hangar, looking at the planes that are there and reinforcing the stuff you're already doing, because that's not helping anything and it's not changing anything, and nothing's gonna be different. But unfortunately, I feel like, you know, way back to confirmation bias. People who need to hear that are not listening to this podcast.
It's so hard
People
to
who
see that to just
pe- People who are
yeah.
listening to this podcast are either rethinking their faith, or they're beyond that, or people listening to this podcast are not ones who are doing the opposite of what we're talking about, which is kind of, I mean, there's probably some people a little bit on the line, but and that
Yeah.
this another reason that, like, all of these things together are why toxic environments persist, and why we are in such a, in my mind, a, uh, a, scary situation in this country, where we're putting ourselves into echo chambers, ignoring everything else that comes in as dangerous, only talking to people who believe what we believe, staying because we feel like we have to, etc., etc., etc. And I think that the problem with churches in is the same problem we have with politics in this country right now, and the divides that we have. And the only solution, I think you nailed it right at the beginning of this whole discussion, was expanding your view of things, getting to know some differences, getting to know different people along in different areas, and hopefully that'll do something.
With an intention, I think a common theme is intentionality. So
Yeah,
knowing these things
true.
are going to happen on accident to good people,
Mm-hmm.
um, what it takes is what I think Jesus did, by the way, when he stopped. I don't think it's because he didn't have cognitive biases. I think he probably did, because I think he was a person
Yeah.
with a human brain. Um, but he had intention to stop and notice people. Um, his
Yep.
story about, what do you do when a sheep wanders away wasn't you figure out why the 99 stayed. It was you seek after that one. Um, and I think what we have to do is be aware and be intentional about, okay, what are the mistakes that I'm going to make as I process the world, and there's too much of it to process. Um, yeah, and for if we could bribe church leaders just to listen to some stories of people who left with, I don't know, with curiosity or with sincerity, right?
Yeah.
Instead of with a, you know, um,
Of you to confirm what they already believe about you.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's where all these articles lately are coming up about why people leave, why people are deconstructing, and they're all wrong. Because they want to sin more, because they want to look cool. That's not it.
yeah,
And that's all these kinds of fallacies are exactly why it's so hard. It's so difficult. It because you're bucking back against all of these things, all of these walls you've put up in your mind to ensure comfort and consistency, and suddenly those things are gone because you've learned something, you've had an experience, something has shifted in you, and those walls have fallen down, and now you're exposed in the wilderness, and you feel alone, you're having a hard time, but you can't go back to those walls because they've crumbled for you.
mm-hmm. Man,
And
I wonder if the sunk cost fallacy is part of what is painful about deconstruction, because
yeah, yeah,
deconstruction is, I think, more about grief than about anything.
I think
Or
I
that's
have heard.
one big, big part of what the feeling of deconstruction is about. It's about the loss of something.
Yeah.
Um, when my if I took a moment to measure my personal experience, it is one of absolutely better experience, like deeper faith, uh, a direction that is of growth, um, and of seeking, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I'm thinking about the losses because they're so concrete and et cetera, that when I think about what deconstruction is, the first thing I think of is the grief and not the
Mm,
freedom or clarity or whatever else. And
yeah.
it made me think of um, common friend Dan, who posted um, recency bias, that
Yeah.
you know we think of our lifetimes, or we think of even just the last 6 months, and we extrapolate it like everything
Mm.
is worse than before. And what he showed were graphs of the last 100 years,
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
showing here's how the percentage of people who have access to I don't I didn't look at it
Like
that
infant
closely.
mortality rates and
Yeah, clean
access to health
water,
care, and yeah,
literacy,
yeah. It's way
and
better than it used to be.
and exponentially better. And this decade was better than last decade, and etc. But each decade, each generation experiences some kind of loss.
Hmm.
Like, oh, they didn't have the internet when I was a kid. We had to use the thesauruses, and what we've
Yeah.
lost is this, patience and the ability to, whatever. Every generation loses something, and focuses on what is being lost, and doesn't do a good job of what's being gained. I
Hmm.
think deconstruction, or just this stepping into that wilderness um, is a very painful process for a lot of people, but um, there's a lot of um, yeah, but I think it's stepping towards something worthwhile.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's worth it.
yeah,
Well, this is a long one. Made up for lost time, huh?
yeah, yeah. People are they're
You
hungry.
don't
We
have to
haven't.
listen to it all at
It's
one time.
yeah. Thank goodness. Yeah, I like the Spotify stuff has been coming in, so that's cool to see. Um,
Oh yeah.
the following the fire discussion group.
Right. We forgot to talk about that. Yeah. On
Yeah, if you
Facebook.
made it this far and you haven't joined the following the fire discussion group, you're missing out.
Yeah. So I'll put a link in the show notes and on our website. But if you go to following the fire, or sorry, if you go to facebook.com/following the fire, that'll take you to our podcast page, and you can find a link to the group from that. But you can also search for following the fire discussion group in the groups. And so it does. I started this last week. Just I thought, maybe we'll give this a shot. And like in a couple days, we've got like 92 members right now. I think there's lots of really good discussions talking about all kinds of stuff. It's not about our episodes necessarily, but it's about deconstruction, kind of getting to know each other, and
Yeah.
um, like initially, there's obviously a lot of people kind of from a Church of Christ background, but we even have some Catholics and Methodists in there. So
Yes.
yeah, we are like edgy.
All the yeah. Oh man. Yep.
But yeah, thanks to all the people who have joined that so far. And there's like I said, lots of good discussions. My Facebook notifications are blowing up like they hadn't
Mm-hmm.
before, so it's good.
Yep. If I
So
haven't
feel free to
responded to
join.
something, it's because I only open Facebook for real like once a week,
Yeah, it's probably wise.
and the other times it's just to get the notifications to turn off.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Facebook
Anyway,
is a program designed to exploit our cognitive biases
oh boy, ugh.
and make money from it. So sign up today for.
But it's gonna be fine.
But ours is good. Ours is a good one.
We've always used Facebook. It's like we've always done it this way.
That's what we've always done. Yeah, and everyone around me's doing it.
Everybody's doing it.
Yeah, it's probably
problem.
fine.
Well, thanks for the discussion, Nathan.
Yeah. Thanks,
Great.
Steve.
We'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good.